Uh-oh. Oh, yeah.
Ribbon world is a term coined by sci-fi writer Isaac Asimov to describe the habitable circumference of a tidally locked planet. It's also the name of this Puerto Rican ribbon supply store. If you need ribbon, rest assured that they are the leaders in this product category. But in Factorio terms, a ribbon world is a map that's, vertically challenged. If you want to actually beat the game, it has to be at least 9 tiles high, so we'll be doing that. It's also technically possible to win if it's only 11 tiles wide, but trust me, we'll need the horizontal breathing room to weaponize our own ribbon. Yes, despite the limited space, we're going to be moving our creations around this world in a very special way. We're giving ourselves the small mercies of no biters and rich ore patches, but to compensate, there's also no uranium and no mods allowed. And apparently these ore patches still aren't rich enough to start us out with any stone, so I explore to the west. After clearing a path through a forest, I hit a lake, and it looks like the nearest stone is trapped on the other side. I guess getting more furnaces will be a quest with a capital Q. I'll set up a bit of smelting to run while I head eastward to resolve that quest as soon as possible. The initial burner stage of any Factorio game is usually bottlenecked by smelting speed, but apparently our first bottleneck will be walking speed. Surely the stone can't be that far away. A 30-second sprint later and I find our first oil field. That'll be convenient. Later. Another 30 seconds or so and I find some cupric stone. And then some ferrous stone. As I clear a path through the 100-acre woods, I finally find one rock. The map is just taunting me at this point. Then even more copper, and more forest to clear right on top of it. Maybe the roots grow through the cracks or something. I found it! I found the stone! Finally, I can trade for wheat and sheep. In my excitement, I use my spare furnace to start smelting the stone because I'm an idiot who's far too eager to skip to the usual first step of direct feeding furnaces from burner miners. But I soon realize my mistake and set up the stone to buffer into a box. Then I use a flash drive to jam down my A key and start running back with a few more furnaces in tow. I used the iron plates that smelted while we were on our walkabout to craft some more burner miners and finally kick this run into, well, first gear, I guess. Now I need more furnaces, so time for another trip to the quarry. It's a little faster because there's a path clear of trees now, but it's still 2.5 minutes long. This time I use a laser pointer to jam down my D key. I retrieve our stone bounty and then queue up some supplies to handcraft during the journey home. We will be doing a lot of handcrafting this run. If you're in the mood for a really tedious challenge, I recommend trying for the Lazy Bastard achievement on this map. After throwing together a few hand-fed boilers, it's time to queue up our initial research. I decide to prioritize landfill so I can cross that lake as soon as possible. I set up a bunch of red science to handcraft during yet another 5-minute round trip to the stone. After coming back and dropping off the science in our lab, I come face to face with an extremely annoying reminder of the lack of mods. For this entire run, pipes will remain as solid and impassable as real pipes. We've unlocked green science, but we still haven't even automated red science yet, so getting the research over this next hump will require some babysitting. One more trip to the stone patch, and this time we take the mining setup back with us. We have enough stone now to bridge the gap to the closer patch. Thought I was done with the shuttle run after high school gym class. And landfill research is done. I immediately make what little I need to cross the lake. Let's queue up some more research. It's an hour in and I'm eager for a speed boost after the stone incident, so I'd like to skip right to steel furnaces. Now that we finally have easy access to every resource, I start setting up some electric mining. After a bit more power and a bit more pain, I also set up some actual science automation. Then I add a bit of steel production, so we have enough to make the better furnaces ASAP. I'm so excited to get them, I accidentally try smelting steel before I even learn what steel is. But soon enough the labs educate me and we start smelting. The stone piles must grow. Why yes, I am plotting something. We finally unlocked steel furnaces, so I think it's time we set up some brick smelting. At this stage, I'm just hand extracting smelted products and handcrafting supplies. I want to stockpile a lot of supplies because I'd really like to not have to set up a belt-based mall in such a confined space. Here's some quick and dirty rail automation. And here's some quick and dirty locomotive automation. At this point, it's probably time to unveil the master plan. You've heard of main bus, now get ready for train bus. Yes, we're going to turn this short king of a map into a train world, and not just one mixed train going back and forth. No, we're going to have 30 trains zipping around this base by the time we're done. But how do we do that when we can't even fit in a U-turn? Here's the theory. We're going to make one main line that stretches the entire length of the base. Trains need to travel in both directions because there's no room to turn around, so they'll need to be double-headed. But we can't let them deadlock by engaging in Mexican standoffs, so the main line needs to be divided exclusively with chain signals in both directions. That way a train can move from point A to point B only when the entire path is clear. But we still have two problems. First, making the most of our vertical space means putting the rails right up against the top edge of the map, but we need to have signals on both sides of the rail to allow trains to travel in both directions. Second, these aren't 2.0 rails. Making any branch needs a minimum of 4 tiles of space in between, which doesn't leave enough space for an east-facing stop to include, the actual train station. Thankfully, we can solve both these problems at once. By diverting the main line towards the bottom and then branching off that diversion, we can let an east-facing stop hug the top edge of the map instead of the bottom, which leaves room for the train station to fit. Doing this also creates room on the top edge of the main line to fit the bidirectional signals we need. It all takes a bit extra horizontal room, but horizontal room we have in abundance. Then all we have to do is make sure we always place east-facing stations facing east and west-facing stations facing west. In other words, because our trains can't turn around, they can only travel in one direction to load and the other direction to unload. Any attempt to mix up the order just won't work. Finally, if we ever want to not hand fuel all our trains, or God forbid make a belt-based mall, we'll need a global bot network. That means breaking up every build into chunks no longer than 46 tiles, so we can fit roboports down the entire length of the base. After running the main line through, we have 7 tiles of space to design the actual builds. This stage of design is made a bit easier because I already have a library of 7-tile wide builds mostly ready to go. One of my older projects was a series of builds for every major ingredient, each with different levels of throughput but all with the same interface. The idea being that you could plug one into a main bus or some other distribution system, and if you ever needed more of some ingredient, you could swap its build out for an upgraded version without needing to change how it was hooked up. They're 7 tiles wide because that's as wide as an 8-beacon assembler build can be, minus the beacons themselves, so upgraded versions could always fit beacons beside them. So these will provide a good starting point. Let's start designing a few of these with green circuits. Here's a fun fact. 3 copper wire assemblers to 2 circuit assemblers isn't the only way to get a perfect crafting speed ratio. Another way is to use Tier 1 assemblers for the circuits and Tier 2 assemblers for the wire. The difference in crafting speed is exactly 50%, which gives us a perfect ratio with only one of each assembler. We can also upgrade and get a nearly perfect ratio with identical assemblers using 2 Tier 1 speed modules for wire and 2 Tier 1 productivity modules for circuits. 3 of these builds will be enough to supply 45 science per minute. We're aiming for 45 because that's how much you get when you use a perfect ratio of Tier 2 assemblers and no modules. Also because scaling this base any further than that would be a massive pain. Here I had to get up and leave the game running for a while because my cat was very loudly demanding belly rubs, so take a few moments to gaze at my beautiful 7-tile wide smelting array. It puts out a full yellow belt of plates and has room for roboports. Oil is an interesting challenge. At only 7 tiles of height, you're basically forced to turn refineries sideways and chain them together with a crapload of underground pipes. We need 8 refineries for the close enough advanced oil processing ratio, so we'll split them in the middle and add another roboport. Fluid tanks are big, so let's not circuit control our cracking. Since we're using game version 1.1, the fluid system will drain into the first available machine, so simply by putting the lubricant production first on the heavy oil line, we can effectively prioritize it over the cracking plants. We barely need any lubricant, so we'll avoid a bit of train congestion by bot feeding the lubricant to Yellow Science using barrels. Light oil, meanwhile, should be prioritized to rocket fuel production before being cracked down into petroleum, so we're making that next. One solid fuel plant can feed 2 rocket fuel assemblers, so we can try to make the rocket fuel build super compact. Emphasis on try, though. Feeding the light oil, water, and petroleum lines forward to the next stage of cracking while still minimizing space is a challenge, but eventually I make it good enough. We need 7 light oil cracking plants to maintain the close enough oil ratio, but that's only if you're not actually using light oil, which we are. So we can get away with 5 plants, because that's as many as we can fit before needing to place another roboport. Then I add a tiny amount of sulfur and sulfuric acid. Like the lubricant, we'll also plan on moving sulfur from here to Blue Science by bot since it needs so little. Iron for the acid will also be hand-fed for now and bot-fed later. And you know what, while we're doing petrochemicals, let's finish it off by pushing the petroleum forward and doing all our plastic while we're at it. I'd like to do steel all in one station instead of creating more traffic for the iron trains, so here's how to use one underground pair to turn a coal ore belt into a coal plate belt. Science trains will run backwards, meaning they'll load to the west and unload to the east. Other ingredients will flow from east to west as we expand, but other ingredients build on each other in a way that facilitates such expansion. If we built our labs directly west of the red and green science, we'd have to rip up the labs and rebuild them when we got to blue science, and repeat for yellow and purple. Running the science trains in reverse means we won't have to rebuild the labs at all. The labs themselves can trivially fit in 7 tiles, at least if you're not doing any black science, which we aren't. It's just 3 belts feeding from one side with some strategically placed long-handed inserters. After consulting this speed reference I made, it looks like we need 21 labs with Tier 1 productivity modules to always be able to consume our 45 science per second. A few copy-pastes and a gap for a roboport later, and we have our lab set up. You know what, I think we're about ready to jump back into the game and start building some of this stuff, so let's tear down our starter base. First, we'll need a proper steam engine stack. Whenever you're placing blueprints, it's a good idea to make a deconstruction planner filtered to ghosts. If there's ever a problem, the solution is just a click and drag away. In this case, the problem is that I made an all-in-one steam engine blueprint without accounting for water and coal being unpredictable distances away from each other, so I'm forced to abandon the blueprint entirely and just make it from scratch. Time to secure some of those resources we found during our stone quest earlier. First up is oil. We don't have any water here, so we'll place the oil on a train to go somewhere else. But it feels wrong not using this space in between for something, so we'll try putting the labs here and... uh-oh. Yes, it turns out I'm an idiot who misjudged the placement of the roboports, and now this blueprint has no room to maintain the contiguous bot network. After heading back into the lab and moving the science unload stations another 2 tiles apart to make room, now the stations are too far apart. I spend way too long fighting it, but eventually I give up and place a roboport after every station. I also have the epiphany that the new roboport layout will block one of the science belts, so I'll send the first one backwards and then route it in the space below the bottom rail. And here's how it's laid out once it's done. Guess who forgot to record themselves finishing the design process? Oh well. Time to build it. One edit I forgot to make is to the chests. My default unload station blueprint uses red passive provider chests instead of normal steel chests, so that logistics bots can have access to supplies to feed the mall assemblers, which I'm planning on placing piecemeal in the open spaces between builds. But sciences aren't used in any mall recipes, so we don't need that feature here. And we'll use the remaining space to throw down some green circuits. Then some copper to feed the circuits. At this point, I was playing around with speed modules in miners to guarantee a full yellow belt of output, despite the fact that the ore patches are plenty big enough to saturate one belt without any modules at all. Next problem. I forgot there wasn't enough space to the west of this iron patch to fit a smelting array, at least not if I also wanted to mine this copper. But there is space to the east, so we just shift into reverse. You can see me pasting the miners as far back as possible like an idiot, so if I ever want a full belt of this stuff, I'd need speed modules. This is what 3,000 hours of experience looks like, apparently. These smelters don't have coal to fuel them, so we'll throw some of our copious wood stores in for now. If we ever want to change that, we'll need to bring in coal from the east, so let's go find some. After handcrafting enough landfill to cross this lake and jumping over a few oil puddles, the very next resource patch is some rich black coal. I've only made enough landfill to run a power line to the main base and not much else. But on the way back, I pass a stone patch and have the brilliant idea to set up some temporary landfill production. While waiting for landfill to craft, I have the epiphany that my speed moduled miner plan was stupid, so I rip up the entire iron smelter array and rebuild it. Alright, landfill is made and the lake has rails. Just need to set up the train schedule and... oh, apparently I forgot to rename the coal unload stop. No matter, we'll drive this train back ourselves and rename it once we get there. Beats running anyway. And now iron plates finally abound. Copper plates abound too. Now we just need to wait for this train to fill up and... wait, no path? Well, we can drive it there ourselves, no problem. And it pulls in fine if it's right in front of the stop, so it has to be a signal issue somewhere. Thankfully it can get back fine, so it's Harry Styles' fault. Oh, not the iron train too. This one can't even pull into the load stop directly in front of itself. Okay, while we're brainstorming, let's take a moment to admire the 5 green circuits per second that we've finally automated. This genuinely feels like a minor achievement. Okay, I figured out the iron train. The culprit was me not noticing that the last segment of rail hadn't actually been placed yet. I spend a while in the lab racking my brain trying to figure out what the copper train issue could be, only to eventually realize that the problem is this one unnecessary chain signal I didn't even see that somehow remained in the green circuit blueprint from an earlier draft. Thankfully, none of my other blueprints appear to be infected. This is about when I decide it would be a good idea to tag the map with icons so I can actually see what's being made where, and oh my god, these icons are gigantic compared to the map. Turning these train stations off and on myself is becoming a drag, so I decide to handcraft some science just to get circuit networks researched and out of the way. I want to get a head start on steel, so let's finally expand westward and start placing our steel line on the ore patch right next to the steam engines. Engines can't be handcrafted and we'll need a ton for our trains, so I set up this hand-fed mini-mall next to the steel just for that. I expect most of my mall production will be spread out into bite-sized chunks like this, although hopefully supplied via bots. Now that we have all our basic resources, I think it's about time to start laying down some properly automated red and green sciences. All the supplies to make these builds are being handcrafted as I go. Hopefully that won't become a theme. A bit later, while gazing upon the glory of my work, the first red science train comes in. I wonder why my green science is taking so long to come in, only to discover that it's bottlenecked because I haven't researched inserter hand size upgrades. Nothing we can't compensate for with a few more inserters, though. It's about time to start building some oil processing, but I quickly realized that a lack of easily accessible water means there's not really a great place to put it. Water to the west would mean I'd have to find a way to route it backwards through the plastic, and the only location with water to the east would require me to build on top of a copper patch. So I'm going to do something I thought I'd never have to do. I'm actually going to make a water train. Can't forget to tag it on the map. After setting up our oil and water train unload stops, it's oil time. Now that we have plastic to start making red circuits with, we'll need to scale up our green circuits. That means securing more copper and iron, so let's travel back eastward. You can see I've altered the smelting blueprint to use more miners and 0 modules. The red circuit build draws from one normal belt and one underground belt, and then sideloads its output onto another underground belt. That's 3 belts running parallel to assemblers in just 7 tiles. We're using this oddball technique because I'm trying to make all my red circuits in one build, so we're moving too much copper wire through here to fit in one lane. It also uses modules because apparently I haven't learned my lesson yet. I know I'm safe up here as long as I hug the top edge of the map, but these trains still give me a little bit of a jump scare every time. We finally have everything we need to make blue science, so let's start making it. Time to queue up some robot research, and then...
No.
Yes, in my hubris, I completely forgot that requester chests are unlocked with yellow science, not blue science, which means my cheeky little plan to avoid needing to make sulfur and lubricant trains will now result in me hand-feeding a ton of sulfur and lubricant barrels for many, many hours. It also means I'll need to fuel most of my trains by hand, too, although we can be clever about a handful of them.
I'm already automatically fueling the coal train with coal because that just makes sense. But during one of my many solo foot races, it also occurred to me that I can make solid fuel from petroleum and use that to automatically fuel the oil and water trains at their unload stations. Let's put that misery out of our minds for a moment and secure some more resource patches out east, starting with this iron patch. The blueprint still requires that we also secure another coal patch further east than this, but there has to be something close by. Copper, iron, more iron, stone, water, wood, more copper, more water, a lot more water, Well, nothing to it but to keep going. Copper, more copper, stone, iron, more copper, more water? Copper inside water. God, what have I gotten myself into? Okay, there's some oil. Worst comes to worst, I could turn that into solid fuel and send that back, but at this point I'm mostly continuing out of morbid curiosity. There is no way I want to bring in fuel from this far away. Stone, jeez. And more stone right next to it. I guess this is where it all went. The map really is taunting me. Well, 34 coal from that rock. At this point, I give up laying more train tracks and start walking just to see how bad it gets. And I find... Alright, screw that. I'm sure there's more somewhere, but I'm done throwing good rail after bad. New plan. Reload and autosave, rip up this iron smelting station, mine this coal patch right next door, and send its train backwards. Then we'll lay the iron smelter back down with its coal stop direction reversed. You may have noticed that I'm learning the value of making these mining and smelting blueprints modular, so I can more easily mix and match belt and train directions for new patches. While we were going insane, blue science started working. One of our trains died by the lab stations, so I'll ride over both to refuel it and to wait for the science to come in. I genuinely enjoy just sitting here and watching these trains roll past. It's a delicate balancing act, but lack of requester chests aside, we've pulled it off. Ah, isn't it beautiful? Advanced Oil Processing is done researching by the time we make it back to the refineries, so I start setting recipes. These labs are just that fast. Or maybe I'm just that slow. Putting your personal train directly onto the main line is dangerous. Ask me how I know. I happen to take a look at our power grid, and it's not doing so hot. One steam engine stack just isn't cutting it anymore. Wait, why is that going down? Oh no. The coal miners don't even have enough energy to mine enough coal to keep the boilers going. We're in a power death spiral, and there's the blackout. Alright, so we need to set up another steam engine stack immediately. This spot on the other side of the water train lake seems good enough. We'll have to bring in coal from the existing east to west stop, but it should be fine. Everything else using that train doesn't need very much coal, except plastic maybe. This will also be the unload stop closest to the coal load station, which means it should physically prioritize power over production, which is exactly what we want. Once I've got it set up, I give it a kick with what coal and solid fuel I have on me. A minute later, and we're back in business. We need to shore it up a bit before calling it safe, though. Back at the first stack, these miners just aren't putting out enough coal to sustain the boilers, so we add a few more. Good thing we did, too, because the other stack just dropped off the grid? Why would it... Oh. You know what? I changed my mind. I don't like that these steam engines are stealing coal from the furnaces. But if you remember our doomed quest earlier, there isn't any more coal to the east for literal kilometers. While scanning the map to see if I somehow missed anything, I noticed some oil patches and have one of my better ideas from this run. We don't strictly need coal to power boilers, we need fuel. So now that we actually have petrochemicals up and running, we can do some basic oil extraction and turn these oil patches into solid fuel. The coal train will still go to the furnaces, but this new solid fuel train will take care of any and every new steam engine stack we care to throw down. There. Now it's safe. I immediately chew up a bunch of our new power by queuing up a bunch more blue science research, before heading back and dropping some Tier 1 productivity modules in the labs and the green circuit assemblers. Every little bit counts. We'll need more copper and iron to make more green circuits, to make blue circuits, to make yellow science, to make robots. Also, I gave a cookie to this mouse and now it's asking for a glass of milk? Anyway, I'm apparently so excited to get these new mines up and running that it takes me several minutes to notice the warning that a train is out of fuel again. I've learned my lesson from the lubricant and sulfur incident, so for this stone mine, I'm not messing around. 1 stone train, 1 brick train.
Before I was arrogant, but now my heart is humble, and my spirit is...
We'll only need them for purple science, but whatever, I was here anyway. This is the last green circuit build, but here I accidentally handcraft the modules for 2 builds worth. Productivity modules I can reuse elsewhere, but the speed modules are a total loss. I realized while editing this video that I had a microphone plugged in during this session, and OBS was recording it. Now it's finally time for blue circuits. The only noteworthy feature here is how we turn the assembler fluid inputs sideways to face each other, which lets us fit the acid pipes between the inserters. And now for low-density structures. Again, fairly straightforward, just 3 things in, 1 thing out. As with blue circuits, they're not difficult so much as they are hungry, but we've already scaled up all their ingredients, so all we should have to do is plug and play. The philosopher Alain de Botton wrote that, quote, "A good school shouldn't tell us only things we've never heard of before. It should be deeply interested in rehearsing all that is theoretically known yet practically forgotten." The yellow science build I started with was too complicated to adapt to this run, so I redesigned it from scratch, which took about an hour. Rather than show the back and forth of the lab experiments, I'll just walk you through it as I build it. The last ingredient we need to make is flying robot frames, and that starts with batteries. This will be our only battery production, and if we need any for personal equipment, we'll just steal some from here. 3 chemical plants is enough. We'll also sideload the iron from the iron-copper line onto an underground to push that forward and use it again later. Next, we'll bring in a steel train and sideload its contents onto the battery belt. After that, a green circuit train rounds out the robot frame ingredients. We'll resort to a bit of belt weaving to get the pipes and gears on opposite sides of one belt. I'm sure there's a cleaner way to do it, but this was about when I stopped caring. Wait, why is everything getting dim? Oh, not again? Were we really over 72 megawatts? Alright, let's kickstart this thing again. Hey, remember a few minutes ago when I said those speed modules were a total loss? That was before I had a brilliant idea to keep this coal belt saturated. And the other steam engine stack has no solid fuel left because the train was only, 96% full instead of 100? Apparently we just barely aren't making enough solid fuel to sustain ourselves here. Whatever, I'll send the fuel train to the unload station and hope it won't happen again before I feel like putting down a 3rd steam engine stack. Where were we? Right, yellow science. I throw in some lubricant barrels I grabbed on the way back from our blackout investigation, and soon we have electric engines. If you're enough of a Factorio nerd to know your yellow science ratios, you may have noticed we're making more of these robot frames than we need for the yellow science. That's because we're only making them here, so I want extras to poach and turn into our beloved robots. Now all we need is to bring in our blue circuit and LDS trains, and we will finally have yellow science. While we wait for that to start crafting, let's put up another steam engine stack. All we really need is a location with some water. I think I recall some rather annoying lakes over eastward back from that parallel universe. 108 megawatts should carry us through to the end, and I am so looking forward to not having to think about this problem anymore. That is, once we can shore up the solid fuel. Doubling production ought to do it. Well, the LDS train is full, so we should have made at least some yellow science, right? Oh, whoops. Double whoops. 3,000 hours of experience. While that starts to craft, I make our last sulfur and lubricant barrel run. And here's what things look like after we get requester chests. All these other flashing not enough ingredients warnings are for the train refueling system, but at this point I'm not going to bother with it. This late into the run, there's just not much point to a totally global bot network. Trains don't need automatic refueling because they won't be running for much longer anyway, and we don't need a bunch of bot mini-malls because we won't be running for much longer anyway. So the bot network really only needs to be big enough to cover our sulfur and lubricant stretches. Having this many red circuits laying around is handy when you have a bunch of roboports you need to handcraft, but it does make me realize what was probably my biggest failure this entire run: not putting limits on these load station chests. It's hard to call it a waste of resources given how rich these ore patches are, but it's definitely been a significant waste of time. Well, not much point fixing it now. Time to swipe a bunch of robot frames to finally make some logistics bots. I've cut out most of the sulfur and lubricant runs for your sake, but let me assure you I am deeply relieved to not have to do this myself anymore. Can't forget to let the sulfuric acid steal iron from somewhere. This iron unload stop for blue science is good enough. Speaking of things I don't want to do myself anymore, let's queue up some personal bot equipment. Just like I forgot requester chests were locked behind yellow science, I also forgot just how much of the personal equipment wasn't. This late into the run, it only takes a few minutes to get through all the relevant research. I swipe a few blue circuits and start crafting. I'm mostly shooting for construction bots to help with the purple science build, but I can also make an exoskeleton. Again, I'm kicking myself for assuming this was locked behind a later science than it was, but this is one luxury I'll gladly take for what little time remains. I briefly consider building a portable fusion reactor, only to rediscover that that's locked behind black science. Solar legs it is, then. Thanks to our preemptive strike on that stone patch, we already have all the ingredients needed for purple science. It's a bit of an interesting build, stacking 2 stick assemblers sideways, routing a bunch of ingredients between assemblers instead of next to them, that sort of thing. I forgot to record the start of the process, but with all our sciences done, it's finally time to start making the rocket silo, or at least the ingredients for the rocket silo. That starts with this quick and dirty concrete build I've shoved in here so it can leach water from one of our steam engine stacks. We'll also need a rocket control unit build. Yeah, remember when those were things that existed? For me, it was last week. We could set up a proper LDS stop here and bring in the rocket fuel with bots, but honestly at this point, I'd just like this run to be over with, so I'm not going to bother making a proper white science build here. Could, but won't. I'll just set the RCUs to insert straight off the production line and chest feed the other two. I don't want to be bottlenecked by RCU crafting speed, so on our way back from the rocket fuel run, I manually start shutting off stops for items we don't need to craft anymore, like sciences. I want as much production as possible bent towards these rocket parts. Always use Tier 3 productivity modules in your rocket silo, kids. Now we just sit here and celebrate the fruits of our labor. And here we are. All that's left to do is to toss something into orbit. I think I know what to send to the stars, don't you? Just over 1 hour per train.
Not great, not terrible.
So yeah, this was an interesting challenge. They say necessity is the mother of invention, and I certainly felt like I had to invent a fair bit to work my way out of this. There are obviously things I'd do differently if I was to try again, like restricting load station buffer sizes and not relying on logistics bot access, but hey, live and learn. What few criticisms I have are more criticisms about the base game, stuff like not being able to walk through pipes and requester chest access time clearly not being tuned for veteran players, but those are all fixable with mods. Overall, I'm glad I pushed myself to take this challenge on. I'm obviously new at this YouTube thing, so if you have thoughts, leave them below, and if there's a next time, I hope to see you there.